Hey ADHD Rewired listeners, the 2022 International Conference on ADHD just passed, and I was joined by Kat Hoyer, who co-presented with me. We talked about accountability and how to make it work. What we would love to do is give ADHD Rewired listeners and the ADHD Rewired community a chance to see that presentation. So mark your calendars, because next week on Monday, November 28th, both Kat and I are going to be presenting a webinar all about supportive accountability. So tune in live on November 28th at 2 p.m. Central. That's 12 Pacific, 3 Eastern. To register for the webinar, go to ADHDrewired.com/events. That's ADHDrewired.com/events. ADHD Rewired, episode 456. This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Go to ADHDrewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free and secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter. You can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups. Learn all about our award-winning coaching and accountability groups. You can co-work with us in our Adult Study Hall virtual membership community. You can do all of these things by going to our website at ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. Today's guest is Dr. D, also known as Dr. Deanna Mercado-Marmarosh. Did I get it right?
Yeah.
Was it close or was it right?
Marmarosh, but close enough.
Marmarosh. Okay. Dr. Marmarosh. All right. She is a family medicine physician, clinic medical director, and chief medical officer. She's also the founder of OverAchieve Life Coaching. Prior to discovering coaching, Dana typically had 200 charts open and a graveyard of unfinished projects. But that has changed, and now she's on a mission to empower healthcare professionals to create simple systems that support their zone of genius and reclaim their freedom of time. Her clients learn to leave work at work. She is happily married with 2 children and enjoys travel, painting, Zumba, yoga, nidra, meditation, and exploring different cultures. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I am so grateful to be here today.
It's always great when we get to chat with actually doctors who also are living the ADHD journey and are kind of figuring out their stuff so they can then help others along the way. And so I think it's really fantastic that you're really focusing on how do you help people just like yourself, which is very much, is the origin of ADHD Rewired as well. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, it's so good to be here. You were one of the podcasts that I was listening to when I was first discovering coaching. I didn't even know that coaching was out there. So thank you for having this available to us and to really consider other things outside of just medicine.
Okay. So when we first talked on your pre-interview and we were sort of discussing about themes and stuff we can talk about, one of the things that your kind of focus, I guess, has been is this idea that as a physician, that you need to stop putting your clients and patients first, which may sound jarring.
Yeah.
What do you mean by this?
So I feel like in medicine, or whether it's coaching or therapy or anywhere really, even in the service industry, right? They always say, do anything and everything for the patient, for the client, customer service first, right? That's really only going to get us halfway, because if you don't put yourself first, if you don't give yourself the oxygen, just like they say when you're getting in the airplane, put the oxygen first and then help everybody else around you, then you don't realize that, yes, you're showing up, but maybe you're showing up 20% charged, 30% charged, instead of you showing up 70 or 80 or 100% charge. So the day that I realized that I was the most important patient in the room was the day that I started to prioritize me and my time and my boundaries from a place of love. And that was when I started to realize that self-neglect was everything else that self-care was not. And I didn't realize that I was living in self-neglect, because to me, I had been taught that by always putting everybody else's first, sacrificing myself was just something that had to happen in order for me to have the privilege of taking care of them. But I didn't realize that contributed to burnout. And I didn't even know what burnout was. Like that word was never even in my vocabulary, because it just meant do whatever it takes to take care of the patient. I just thought it was something that was a way of life. I didn't realize it could be differently. I say this because when I realized that, it was when everything changed. And it was actually kind of funny, because I had hired a coach, and I had hired an ADHD coach about two years ago. And it was the second time that I had missed, the one-on-one session. And sometimes, it's an investment in time and money, right? I was so mad. I told my husband, I was like, I can't believe them. I have it blocked off. Like, why don't they respect my time? And he said, they don't respect your time, or you don't respect your time. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, did somebody put a gun to your head to go into the patient room? And I was like, well, no. And he's like, so why did you walk into the room? And I said, well, because it's my duty. And they're like, duty to whom? You asked for time to be blocked off. You are paying somebody money to show up. You didn't show up. You didn't show up for you, not for the coach. You didn't show up for you. And so that's when I started to realize, oh, shoot, I am important. I am supposed to be present. And if I can't be fully present with all the tools that I still don't understand, because I'm doing my best, but maybe my best is still yet to come, because I don't understand my brain. I don't understand my ADHD brain. I'm trying, I'm looking around, and I'm seeing everybody else doing it a certain way. And I've tried their techniques, but why am I still behind? Something is not right. And that's when I realized that ADHD was just kind of like being left-handed in a right-handed world, right? And that it wasn't wrong. It was just different. And I needed to embrace that difference and learn about it. And I think it was a shift in my perspective, but it was a big shift to where, like, all of a sudden, when I started saying and living it, that atmosphere also changed, because then, sometimes I still roll in a little bit later than I should, but they don't make it mean a thing, because they knew I had to do certain things and I wasn't going to be speeding, right? And I was not going to get myself into trouble, which there's data out there that shows that 10 to 15 years, people might die earlier from doing something impulsive or adrenaline or just not driving, right?
And I do want to add to that, especially for listeners who are not familiar with the life expectancy study. It does show that ADHD can lead to a shorter life expectancy. But the good news in this is that one of the outliers that they've identified in this is people who have a higher level of conscientiousness. And I don't think that this piece is discussed enough in this research, that when people who rank high on levels of high conscientiousness, all of those things around life expectancy and poor health outcomes seem to not actually be the same when it comes to ADHD. So my hope is for listeners listening to this, best part of the goal is to increase your level of conscientiousness.
Yes, exactly.
Because you want to do better with whatever it is that you're trying to do with life.
Yes, good thing you're pointing that out, because the study shows that if you're not medicated, right, because medicating slows us down, but like you just said, mindfulness, exercise, conscientiousness, it's still like taking your medicine, because again, it gives you that insight of being careful, of looking around, of not daydreaming while we're driving, or different things like that, right? So the point is that they started to notice that I was setting boundaries from a place of, this is what I need. Like, no, do not come interrupt 5 times to ask me a question that is not an emergency, because that's going to distract me and it's going to take me a while to get back. So they started to see that I started implementing timers, because then I would have an awareness that I didn't have internally. Now I had an awareness. And we started to make it to where it was, they knock on the door, they come ask me, do I need something? And then I would say, actually, I do. I need this sample, or I need this test to be done, or I need this vaccine for the patient. And so it started to be that it became a style.
It sounds like you were bending the world to you. You were setting up the type of work environment that you needed for yourself.
Yeah.
Right? So what's your ADHD story? When did you get that? Like, when did you learn you had ADHD?
Yeah, so I learned I had ADHD during my first semester of medical school. And I think that the fact that I didn't know I had ADHD was the reason I actually got into med school. Because when I got diagnosed with ADHD, some people might have thought, fabulous, finally, there's an answer to why, blah, 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 right? But for me, I was making it mean that all of a sudden I was broken. All of a sudden, people were going to find out that I did not belong in here. Like they made a mistake, like admitting me into medical school, especially because I was struggling my first year because the amount of information they were throwing at us, I was doing the tools that I had, which was work hard, work hard, work hard. But that was not enough.
When you say work hard, so I'm thinking about here you are not diagnosed. You made it through your undergrad, got your master's, and then went to medical school?
So I actually went to St. Mary's and I did it took me 4.5 years to graduate, but I also got certified as a high school teacher just in case I wouldn't get into medical school right away. Because I knew I was not going to be looking at rats somewhere doing some type of research. I knew I wanted to educate people. So I used that to my advantage. So I had a backup plan just in case medical school was not going to be the first
Okay,
go
so
around.
you had this backup plan. You're undiagnosed. You made it through your program with this backup plan. How hard were you working?
Really hard.
When you say really hard, like tell us what does that look like? Because I always am amazed when I see people who did not get diagnosed until they're in beyond their bachelor's degree, like when they're working on their PhD, or like yourself, you're in medical school. Like, how did you make it that far without getting diagnosed?
So I think the reason I didn't get diagnosed in high school was because I was running. I was in the cross country team. I was in the dance team. I was in so many activities that were giving me dopamine, that were giving me a way to not overthink, so I had to do whatever I had to do, and I didn't waste that time per se. I get to college and they said, oh, you just have to maintain a B average in order to be able to keep your scholarship. And then I get my first C, and then I'm on probation. Like nobody's gone to college from my family, or not even gone to college, not even medical school. That was not even there yet. Like I cannot fail. And so everything, the pressure of failing, I think what was driving me to work hard, I realized that I needed accountability. I signed up myself for tutoring and I said, okay, I know that I don't want to look like a fool when I show up. So I'll try my best to learn whatever I can. And it was in conversations that I would grasp what was critical or important, because to me, everything was critical and important. So it was so hard because I would try to read and then I wouldn't remember what I was reading. Then I would be like, okay, I'm just going to focus on the pictures. And I would try to see, like, if they have a picture, it must be important. Why would they put a picture? And so I would try to give myself clues, and I would try to set up group studies so that in talking to my friends, I could hear what they said, and talking to my tutor, I could hear. And so I started to get better. I didn't realize that I was using food my first year and a half as a way to get my dopamine. I went from being like 125 to like 145, and I'm really short. I'm 5 feet. So I was like, oh my God. And then that, all kinds of stuff. Anyways, I started running again. I couldn't tell that at that point that was what probably saved me and got me to graduate. I was running again. And I think that's what happened. So running and being in an environment where I could ask my friends questions and like push each other and ask them to ask me if I did that paper already or whatever, like that's what got me through.
So what was the actual catalyst that helped you get that diagnosis of ADHD?
So when I get to medical school, I was trying my best. And by trying my best, I mean probably studying 80 to 100 to 120 hours a week. And in the middle of that, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. So I didn't know if it was me being worried that he would pass away that was keeping me from concentrating, or if it was because it was so much information that I had to, again, try to digest. And I didn't have the time to sit with everybody like I did before because I was flying home on Friday evenings and getting back on a flight on Monday mornings at 5 a.m. because it was the cheapest flights. Wow. And so tutoring and trying to do whatever I could I was maybe getting like 60s or like burly, And then when I would look at my tests, whatever I did answer, I had gotten most right. But everything else that I didn't have a time to answer, I had just done C all the way down. And I was hoping some of those were right, So like I ran out of time. My roommate, she said, Diana, I think you need to go seek help. Maybe you're depressed. Maybe you're anxious. Maybe you have something else going on. It could be that you're both because, what you're going through with your dad. But just go check. She's like, because I think I study like 1/3 of what you do. And I have no idea how I can be scoring higher than you. Yet I talk to you, and in talking to you, you know the material. So where is the disconnect? You got it. Like you're teaching me. I just went and took the test. You just taught me. She's like, I don't understand. There's something that is not adding up. Yeah. And so they said, okay, well, you need to do this neuropsych test. And it was like a 9-hour test and it was done over 2 days. Then they give me the thing and they say, okay, Diana, you have ADHD. And I was like, what is that? And they're like, you're 2 years behind.
So that wasn't even on your radar.
No, because I come from a family, we're Mexican American. I grew up, even though I was born in Texas, my parents were immigrants. I think we have that immigrant mentality that if you're moving eventually to the US, you're going to do whatever it takes to do your dream. So you work hard and you just have implanted in your brain that education is going to be one of the keys to get you ahead and that you're the land of opportunity. And so even though I learned English at the age of 10, that's when my parents decided to move to Texas, I was not upset that I was only 2 years behind. I was upset of the diagnosis that, oh my God, now they know I'm not perfect because I was the first one in my family. I was the oldest. And I was like, if I'm not like smart, then what do I have? Like in my mind, I thought that ADHD meant not smart or not perfect or not able to follow my dreams. And so that was obviously one of the things that was a thought error that at that point I didn't realize was a thought error. And I was just really ashamed of the diagnosis because in the medical field, mental health is not something that is talked about.
Yeah, and I know too, you mentioned with your culture that you do what it takes. And I know too with med school, because I've talked to so many med students, it's like that to the extreme and it's so unhealthy. And so you have all these combinations of factors that it's like you are trying to swim upstream without fins, right?
Yeah.
So let's do this. I want to take a really quick break. When we come back, I want to kind of hear a little bit more about after you learned you had ADHD, kind of what that process was like for you and to kind of where you are today. So let's take a quick break and we will be right back. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from our coaching community at coachingrewired.com. We've had almost 1,000 adults with ADHD go through our award-winning 10-week coaching program. At 4 seasons per year with multiple groups per season, one thing is for certain. With the right tools and the right support, with people who understand the struggles we face, we can do hard things, and we don't have to do them in the hardest way possible. Get registered for our upcoming registration event next Thursday, December 1st at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 Eastern by going to coachingrewired.com to start your pre-registration process.
I decided to join this group because I was stuck.
Before this group, I doubted my ability to grow.
I decided to join this group because I couldn't be alone anymore. So I decided to join because I was trying to do this by myself and it just wasn't working.
Before this group, I was busy but not efficient.
I joined the group for all the tricks of how to plan, and they work.
Yeah, learning to plan. Planning was probably my biggest thing, and the importance of daily planning and thinking that through, whether it's the night before, the day or the morning of, yearly planning, and how much that's going to affect me in the future.
Increasing my time awareness without being stressed is such a big win for me.
I think that I've made strides that would have taken me 10 years, if not more, if I weren't in this group.
Things that I've learned is scheduling, not over-scheduling, time management, and how to plan for the future.
I discovered hope and the possibility of change around things that I was convinced were immovable.
They just taught me to be compassionate with myself and to say, hey, this is a process.
The thing that I learned was I have a place in this world.
This is the place that you have ADHD to be.
To be around these people that think like I do. It's just such a relief to know that you're not alone, that you might not think like everybody around you, but you certainly think like a bunch of people that are in the world.
My biggest takeaway is that it's okay to be me. It's okay to need support in ways that others don't. And it's okay to celebrate things that I'm proud of, no matter what anyone else thinks.
And I just want to thank everybody for being here because it's so powerful to just listen and be with everybody else.
Yes, life with ADHD has its challenges, and it could feel like we're living on hard mode. There's also no one-size-fits-all approach to managing our ADHD. But with ADHD Rewired's coaching and accountability groups, not only will you have a shame-free and judgment-free space to experiment with all the different tools and tips we share, but you'll also have a community behind you to cheer you on, because we can do hard things, and we don't have to do them alone. So go to coachingrewired.com to get your name added to our interest list and to start your pre-registration process so you can receive your invitation to join us for our next registration event on Thursday, December 1st at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 Eastern. Come grow with us and start your new year by starting with you. That's coachingrewired.com. We are back. All right. So before the break, you were talking about how you got your diagnosis. We're talking about sort of the culture of do whatever it takes, both medical school culture as well as culture as being Mexican American. And by the way, congratulations, by the way, for being the first person in your family to get any kind of advanced degree. That's got to be huge. And I'm sure that was so much pressure too.
Yeah, it was so much pressure because you don't know what you're getting yourself into until you're in the middle of it. But again, because you don't know what you're getting yourself into, you don't make it mean a thing that it's going to take you 10 trials to finally get it right because nobody else has done it before you. Yeah. And so you're just going to keep going because in my mind, I kept thinking of the end result, which was I get to practice medicine in English and Spanish, and my patients are going to understand that I understand them. And as a teacher that had gotten training, I'm going to be able to communicate with them so that they understand what I'm trying to tell them instead of saying big words that they're just going to look at me like they just say and walk out. Yeah.
I think back to my experiences as a patient with my physician. And I was always amazed, so when I would be in his office, kind of going over lab results, so he would talk to one of his patients and then he'd get a call from another doctor. And I was always just blown away by his ability to just pick back our conversation right back up where we left off. How do you do that? How do you as a doctor do that? Because I imagine you're dealing with a lot of interruptions and stuff, or have you set up your environment so you're not having that many interruptions?
So I've now since started coaching in the last 2 years and understanding my brain and understanding that interruptions, if I don't put a nugget before I allow somebody to interrupt me, it's going to take me a lot longer to get back into it. Somebody without ADHD might take them a minute or less. Somebody with ADHD might take us 5 to 10 just to try to get back to where we were at. And we don't even start where we were at. We start 2 steps back. So it was an understanding that point. That's when I started setting what I was kind of saying earlier, telling people don't get me out unless it's really an emergency, because then that's going to mean I'm going to go walk in and the patient now has 5 more other questions that I thought we were done with the encounter.
Now, when you start, so you're the clinical medical director. When you first started in practice, was it your practice or were you working for within a clinic?
So when I finished residency, I did 2 years at a county hospital in Houston. I was one of few Spanish-speaking doctors, so I was always swamped. And you could always imagine 2 to 3 hour wait. That was just the norm for me. And I would keep saying, like, somebody else is available, they can see you. And they'd be like, well, Dr. Mercado, we waited 3 months or we waited 6 months. What is 3 hours? We'll wait. And I was just like, oh my God. And so it was a good thing because I was grateful that they trusted me enough for it. But it was a bad thing because every time I walked in, my first sentence was, I'm sorry, I'm late.
So how did you go about changing that?
Now I walk in and I say, thank you for your patience.
Love it. We can, oh my gosh, there are so many scenarios that all of us can use that. So instead of the I'm sorry, it's the
and now
thank you.
I know I'm worth the wait.
Absolutely. So when we think about whatever kind of work that we are in, and I think that, when right before we record, I was saying, well, I want to be able to have this conversation be something that really could be of value for not just physicians, but for, people in any kind of service profession. Because I know that there's a lot of our listeners who are in service industries, right?
Right.
So there's counselors or coaches, or even like consultants of non healthcare related fields. So I think like this kind of stuff is, when we're working at a high level, there's this expectation that we have our shit together, right? And then becomes the imposter syndrome when the fear that, someone might realize we don't actually have all of our shit together, right? Because we have these certain challenges. So how do you go about communicating with your patients?
Now I've come to give myself grace and accept myself for what I am. A human being, just trying to be, and not being married to the title, right? Like not being married to the title of being a mom, being a wife, a doctor, being a teacher, whatever. Like that's something I like to do and I'm enjoying doing, but that's not who I am. And so now I bring on myself, all my humor into it. When they come and they tell me 10,000 things and I'm like, wait a minute. I go, you haven't been here in a little while. You really think I can solve all that? You're falling apart. What are we teasing out? I go, my brain can handle 1 or 2 things before I don't realize what else is going on. So now it's in having those conversations where I can use my humor instead of like rolling my eyes or feeling like overwhelmed. And now I've learned that it's a service for both of us, because you think that you come and tell me 10 things, but you're not even going to remember the other 8 things we discussed. So like you come back and then you tell me, we talked about that. And we're like, we did. I put it on my note. And so why am I saying that? It's because if you don't remember that we all work best in a certain environment or a certain way, if you don't even have that awareness, there's no way that you can change something or continue to do something that is working well for you. When I give now the diagnosis to my patients of ADHD, like I'm so excited. I'm like, oh my God, congratulations, your kid has ADHD. And they're looking at me like she's crazy. And I'm like, no, it's a gift. You just have to learn how to unwrap it. Like you just have to learn how. And if you tap into what they're really into, like it opens all kinds of possibilities.
So you just said that ADHD is a gift, and I don't love that idea,
right?
Because I think there's this kind of toxic positivity associated.
Well, that's
with
why
that.
I said you have to learn how to unwrap it.
And say more about that, because I think that sometimes I think when we say gift, it's the thing that's gonna make us feel better about this thing that we have. It's like, wait, do you want a word to make you feel better, or do you want to feel better because you actually are understanding what you're working with and know how to do it, right? Like the first is a word, and it takes just a second to feel better. But that's short-lived, right?
Yes.
And my concern when people are thinking about this, ADHD is a gift, if they are just riding on that, the amount of blind spots that are going to bite them in the ass is going to be painful.
Yes. So what I mean by that is that in general, most people who have ADHD tend to be creative. They tend to think outside the blocks. Even the time blindness thing can actually be a thing as a gift, because while stuff's going down, you're cool as a cucumber. You're like, yeah, I can solve that, because to you, 1 minute or 5 minutes doesn't mean a thing. To you, time is fluid. So you could learn to maneuver high stressful situations. Like, you're like, I live in this phase. This is always me in my life. Like a day in my life, like something. Okay, I went to Costa Rica like a couple of weeks ago. Why am I the only one who lost the bottom of their shoes after the tour guide had hiked for 15 years? To me, it was just a thing that happens to me in my life. I didn't make it mean a thing. You know, he's like, te la juegas, which means like, are you willing to play? Like, are you going to move on? Or are we ending this tour here? Are we going to get a golf cart to come grab us? And I was like, dude, my ancestors walked this earth without shoes. I'm sure I can figure it out until we, let's keep going. Right. So for somebody that might have been the end of the world. For me, I was like, well, this is just day in my life. Stuff like this happens to me all the time, and I don't make it mean a thing about me or whatever. And I'm just like, okay, I'll roll with it. So what I mean by a gift is that you don't let it slow you down where it might be paralyzing for somebody else. I don't make it mean a thing that I might look at a perspective from 10 different angles, because then that means that's why I'm a good leader, because I can look past, instead of just telling you, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. I can listen to what you're saying and then still find a happy medium where it's a win-win situation where you grow, I grow, we both get what we want, instead of me telling you, no, you're doing it wrong, or shaming you or whatever. It goes back to me now understanding that I don't have that 2-second delay between like you giving me barking orders at me and me not getting like overwhelmed and screaming back at you. Now I know that. So now I can breathe through it. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. And then I can decide if I'm going to answer or say, I'll get back to you on that.
The power of the pause.
Yes. I didn't know that. Right. And so because I didn't know that, if there was too much going on, you would probably describe me as, Dr. Bitch that day, because I was mad that they asked me one too many things. And then they would be like, how is she? Is she in a good mood? Is she in a bad mood? Can we ask? Can we not ask? And now I set boundaries to where like, we don't even have to have that conversation. You already know if they're more than 20 minutes behind, don't ask me, just reschedule them, because they're 20 minutes behind, but I'm probably an hour behind. So imagine I'm not going to see them till like 3 hours from now. So there is no point in them waiting around for me.
Let's talk about boundaries, because I think that is such an important conversation and topic. I think for all of us, as in this, that it's like, we're working 80 hours a week is like, gives people bragging rights, where it's like, and I think there is this now kind of slower sea change that's starting to occur. And I think may potentially be a result of COVID, when people realize, there's actually more to life than work, right?
Right.
So starting professionally, how do you communicate with your team, with the people who you report to your patients? How do you have those conversations around boundaries?
So one of the boundaries I have to make sure was that I was going to eat. I was going to go to the restroom. Like, it sounds silly, but you'd be surprised how many people work through lunch, double book themselves, answer the phone, call back on things that are not really important. And then they want to talk to you for 20 minutes. And those are 20 minutes that are not yours. Like, they're not paying you for it. It's your time out of your schedule. Mm-hmm. Of all the other 20 charts that I haven't done, like I could have done 2 or 3 from there. And so we don't expect the judge or the lawyers, right, to do their own notes while they're judging, right? You don't see them taking their own notes. So it's like decisions are in a situation where you're asking them to do what they need to do, which is thinking and analyzing, plus death by 1,000 clicks of, let me order this, let me do this. It's like, what's going on? Like this, since 2008, where they implemented this EMR system, it's been such a burden on the healthcare industry, because now they're just clicking boxes. Insurance are saying what we need to do or not do. You're being pulled in so many directions. So with boundaries, now I'm like, okay, well, let's get your labs. Come back and see me in a week. We'll discuss your labs at that point, because then I know when it's going to happen. Unless you want to wait 3 or 4 months when I actually have time, if I have time to look at that. So it's boundaries where you know what's going to be expected. And here's the thing. not just for me, because I'm the clinical medical director, we made it a policy for the whole clinic. The same thing with medications. Well, let's not be wondering if this one's going to refill, if that one's not. That everybody gets 6 months unless they're on control. They get 3 and they get a short follow-up in 2.5 months, because then that gives you 2 weeks to not be out of medications. And we will call you to remind you. And again, not just for me, but now I set it up for everybody so that there's no confusion that she wants it that way, he wants it that way. Will people agree? I don't care, but we're doing it for the well-being. And if I'm in that place, they're going to, right?
I love that when you say, well, people agree, I don't care. Because I think you realize this is going to be best for me and my team, that will allow us to actually serve our patients in the best way for us without burning out and I think that is such an important thing. And what you just described is such an important piece about boundaries. And that boundaries is not just putting up walls. Boundaries is creating the structures for those walls so it supports what you're trying to do. Right. And so what it sounds like you're doing is you're creating systems, you're creating processes, you're creating procedures that allow for you to work in the way that actually works for you, instead of, saying yes to everyone and then no one's actually happy because you can't actually meet everybody's needs.
Right. Yeah. And again, and those things with boundaries is that if you already know, and again, boundaries from a place of love, from a place of compassion, from a place of love, that I'm always going to do this way, regardless if it's the president, regardless if it's who it is, then there's no questions, because this is what we're going to do. You already made that decision. You're not wasting your executive decision, executive function, and triggering that emotional dysregulation, because now you have to make 5 more decisions. Oh, for this patient, not for that patient. No, you're taking out all those unnecessary stuff out of the way.
Because decision-making is a huge tax on executive function. It's huge. Let's I want to take a quick break. And then I actually want to continue this conversation on boundaries and really focusing on the boundary of when we leave work, how do we leave it there? So we will be right back. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from our Patreon community at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. When you support us on Patreon at $5 a month, you can get ad-free episodes of this show. Then at $25 a month, you can join me for our coaching call that happens every 4th Tuesday of the month, which means our next monthly coaching call is today, November 22nd at 3 p.m. Central. Patrons at the $10 a month level can get our recordings of those coaching calls every month in our patron-only podcast feed. We really want to thank all of our patrons for supporting our passion for sharing ADHD awareness, and we hope that through listening to this podcast, you feel less alone on your ADHD journey. So if you want to support our work and get some extra perks, then consider joining our Patreon community at $5 a month or more. Get ad-free episodes of the show by going to ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. And support can start at any amount that makes sense to you. Go to ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from you. Thank you to all of our listeners who tune into the show every week. If you don't want to miss out on our weekly episodes, then make sure you hit subscribe or follow in your favorite podcast app, or go to ADHDrewired.com/podcast, where you can find our show notes and links to all the resources we mentioned in each episode. Next week is a great episode. I'm joined by Chris Wang, who joins me to talk about our relationship with feedback. And if you really missed last week's episode, I had a discussion with Robin Buchanan about minimalism and if it's really realistic for those of us with ADHD. So if you learn something new every week or learn about a new strategy, tool, or idea to help augment managing ADHD, then consider subscribing so you don't miss out on the different topics we cover each week. And ADHD Rewired is not alone. When you go to ADHDrewired.com/podcast network, you'll find the rest of the ADHD Rewired podcast family, including ADHD Essentials with Brenda Mahan, Hacking Your ADHD with Will Kerb, and ADHD Diversified with MJ Siemens. And launching soon, we will have 2 more shows on the ADHD Rewired podcast network, so keep tuning in for more announcements on those. episodes. Then you can join me and the rest of the ADHD Rewired team every second Tuesday of the month for our monthly live Q&A. Register by going to ADHDrewired.com/events so you can join us on Zoom and interact with the panelists and other listeners who are tuning in live. Find everything from show notes to events and everything ADHD Rewired by going to ADHDrewired.com. That's ADHDrewired.com. And thanks for listening. All right, we are back with Dr. D. Okay.
Yeah.
So how do we leave work at work?
So I made a whole 12-week course on this. And you heard the introduction. I was somebody, I'm not making it up. I was somebody who had 200 to 300 charts open. And I'm not talking like one moment in time. I'm talking a decade long. Okay, a decade long.
Hearing that is literally like, I'm feeling so anxious just like thinking about all of those open loops. I'm like, oh my God, I'm just going to like quit and become a plumber or something.
Yeah. And the thing is that it was something you don't talk about. Like it was something that I did outside of work. It was something that 20, 30 hours extra unpaid work. Because for me, that was a small price to pay for the privilege of being able to take care of my patients. And I ignored my ADHD diagnosis during those 10 years because when I finished residency, they told me, a psychiatrist told me, you outgrow ADHD. You're a physician. You should know better. You don't need medications. And that was a 2-minute encounter.
Oh my gosh.
And I already was in my head about the shaming and all that stuff. So I told myself, suck it up, Buttercup. You're okay. You're going to do this. So in the last 2 years, when I started coaching and realizing that there was tools and then realizing that no matter if I implemented all these tools, still I wasn't 100% there. That's when I decided to try meds again. And so now the combo, I was like, oh my God, okay. It was like I was driving, without windshield wipers on. And I didn't even know there was windshield wipers. Like I didn't even know.
These
like
things
it's been raining all long.
amazing.
Yeah. And so now, because I didn't think I was any different than anybody else. I was just the first one to start talking about it because now I started to feel like I was talking from a healed wound instead of a bleeding wound, Now, does it sting? A little, but not anymore because it has healed, right? And just like they say, hurt people. Well, healed people heal people. So my first thing was like, okay, how can I impact more? Let me impact the physicians that have ADHD because then the ripple effect of how many patients' lives I'm going to touch in that way, how many encounters it's going to change because now they have their oxygen on mask, right? Leave work at work is the aim of my program. The freedom of time so that you can feel like you can actually leave stuff at work because you need to have a life. Why do we go to work? To take care of our families. Why are we at home irritable with our families? Because we already used all our decision-making capacity throughout the day. Like, why does work have the better version of you?
I know, sort of that idea of like when you're at work, you're just thinking about what you're not doing at home. And when you're at home, you're thinking about what you're not doing at work.
Exactly.
Something's not working then, if that's sort of your normal sort of way of being. So what are some of the strategies that you have found to be helpful in leading work at work?
It's, saying them out loud seems like they're a no-brainer, but it's the simple things that you do over and over that add up. And it's also the simple things that you don't do over and over that add up.
And simple isn't always easy either.
Exactly. So I didn't have a time awareness. Let me use a timer, right? If I feel like this is going to take me 20 minutes because I hate that task, it's probably going to take me a lot longer, right? So double the time and give yourself the grace. And if you finish before, woohoo, celebrate and use that time for your self-care in some way. Or if you know that's not a task that you want to do, no matter if you had 10,000 years, give it to somebody else who will. Like, delegate it. Or if you know you're really good at the big picture ideas, do those and then leave the details to somebody else. Work in your strengths, but it doesn't mean ignore your weaknesses. that's what I mean by creating systems that support your zone of genius, because your zone of genius is your strength. It's things that you can do. Those are your gifts you were born with. Like maybe you're a great speaker. Maybe you're a great writer. Maybe those are things that come so natural to you that you think that who would want to pay for this or who would want to whatever, right? But the other part where we still need to do that to function, we still need to pay our taxes, we still need to pay our bills, we still need to do the oil changes in our cars, we still need to buy the food. Figuring out, is there a way to do that in my calendar where I always do it on Tuesday, or I always have the Instacart, whatever, like deciding which way. So I say that ADHD starts and ends with you. Why? Because you are responsible for learning about it and helping yourself and thriving with it. But if you ignore it, like you said earlier, it can get us into lots of trouble. It really can.
I want to ask you this. So we've got a few minutes left here. You had this experience that you talked about a little bit ago about seeing a psychiatrist and saying that, grow out of it. And this still happens, and they're still teaching this kind of stuff in medical school, and it's maddening. It's like, why, right? If a patient is having an interaction with a doctor and a doctor says to them some version of either they don't believe in ADHD or it's overdiagnosed or you grow out of it, what would you recommend that a patient say back to that doctor?
I would say it's a neurological disease. It's the diabetes of psychiatry. It's a lifelong disease. And just like diabetes, you need to have education, you have to have medicine, you have to have community to help you grow. I would paint a picture for that doctor, because some of them want to give you meds just for work, right? But the thing is, like, you're still at home. You might need something else, a tiny little thing to still help you do the cleaning, do the cooking, do whatever, right? And people tell you just take meds on the weekend or don't take meds on the weekend, right? But like you still have to function on the weekend.
And that's such old school thinking too.
Right, exactly. So I would say educate them politely and then get yourself a new one because that doctor does not know. And you really need to get a second, third, fourth, fifth opinion. When you find the one that understands you, you need to make sure, because you have to be your best advocate. And so now this is why I'm on a mission to change the way mental health is seen, and not just in the ADHD community, but in the physician community. So that's why in April, I'm going to give a talk on how to identify ADHD in physicians and how to identify ADHD among your coworkers and in health professionals and any professional really, so that they understand that it's not just a little kid's disease that is being rowdy in the back of the classroom, but that they understand what it means to not take care of that person because you think they outgrow it. And they don't. Maybe they're divorced. Maybe they failed 5,000 jobs, right? Or maybe they're doing amazing. They're an entrepreneur and they have figured it out. But why not help them if we can? And so I'm on a mission to tell everybody to look at it in a curiosity and fascination. Look at it from a different lens, because it could really be the reason why you're able to change that culture. So I really think, I'm not trying to say that my ADHD did everything, but the reason I kept getting promoted was because I kept being impulsive and saying out loud what people were not. And I was looking around and you're like, well, y'all agree with me. Why didn't y'all say it first, right? And so understanding that if you understand yourself, you're able to not just stay quiet, but be an advocate for yourself. And you don't have to change the whole environment. You might just start to change little things for you, because they might get freaked out if you're all of a sudden saying, well, I need this for everybody, right? But if you start saying, I work best when I don't have people coming in and out of my office, when I have my own person that I have to report to. I work best when I come in at 9 because I tend to be wide awake at around 10 and then I can leave around 6. Like, you get to decide how you show up in your job and be flexible, because when you find that environment that understands you and sees you for your strengths, oh my God, do you flourish.
As a healthcare professional, how do you now define success?
Freedom of time, because so much I felt like I didn't have the freedom of time. I felt like I was that person who was always looking at podcasts on how to adult, how to get it right, like how not to be a slob. Like I kept telling myself I'm a slob. I was like, how can I figure out this doctoring thing, but I can't figure out my laundry, or I can't figure out da-da-da-da-da, right? Now I realize it's because that stuff's boring for me. Like it's not interesting. But okay, and now I turn on Shakira and I'm like, or I have somebody come and help me, right? $10 or something, like somebody's bored. Why not, right? So success to me means you get to really dream up your life and not just dream it up. Because there's like no, I don't know where we stopped dreaming, where we thought that there's a police out there that we're dreaming too big. Like there's no police for telling you you're dreaming too big. Success to me means practicing medicine in your own terms, but really, really what it means is being the CEO of your life, realizing that you have the decision that if you wanted to do whatever it is, and it's different from what everybody else is doing, it's okay. Because if you have that desire, you'll find a way to make it work. And it's the why is the most important. It's going to make you find a way and you'll make it work.
Dr. Deanna Mercado-Marmarosh. Did I get it right?
Yes.
Okay. Or Dr. D. And you can find her at ADHD-lifecoach.com. What else would you like to leave listeners with?
You just started listening. What I want to tell you is that ADHD can be a gift. But like I said, it comes with responsibilities. It's up to you, for you, to accept all of you, to understand you. And so begin every morning saying what went right, what didn't go so hot yesterday. And it's not perfection, it's progress. And know that it's progress, and progress over perfection. I'll take that any day of the week because it means we're doing something.
You're here to that.
And do not think as failure as something wrong. Think about it as a lesson. You either got the lesson you needed or you got what you wanted. If you got the lesson you needed, you're a step closer to getting what you wanted because now you have new data to make new decisions. So don't let fear paralyze you or the what if or what are people going to think. Just keep making the decisions and keep going forward.
We only have one life and, we actually do have the choice on how we want to show up with it.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful. I wish you all the very best of success with your coaching program that you're doing with healthcare providers. And I look forward to meeting you in person at the CHAD conference that may, this actually may come out right around that time. So thank you so much. This was great.
Awesome. Thank you again.
This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHDrewired.com. You can find time-stamped summaries and additional resources for each episode. Apply to join our free and secret Facebook community. Learn more about our award-winning intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. Join the Adult Study Hall virtual co-working membership community. Find all the other podcasts on the ADHD Rewired podcast network. Sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content that you won't hear anywhere else. And use the search tool to find episodes on specific topics. You can do all of this at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click on the Patreon button. If you are a regular listener, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to you, the listener, but it's not free to produce. Plus, patrons get cool perks like ad-free episodes and access to recordings of coaching calls, and $25 a month patrons can join me once a month for a group coaching call. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHD Rewired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. Subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube to see selective interviews and other videos I've made. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends, family, your therapists, your coaches, doctors, siblings, parents. And if you, your coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at the website, ADHDrewired.com. If you're a member of CHAD, ADA, or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this show and all the shows on the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. And if you really loved this particular episode, please hit share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I do count on you to help spread this message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other app that supports reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at Audible by going to audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired. Here is my list of must-listen-to audiobooks updated July 2021. Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Attached by Amir Levin and Rachel Heller. Atomic Habits by James Clear. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Crucial Conversations by Carrie Patterson. The Coaching Habit by Michael Stainer. The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Rest by Alex Sujong Kim Pang. The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins. Make It Stick. The Science of Successful Learning by Peter Brown. The Productivity Project by Chris Bailey. Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions, Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. I always recommend to my coaches and admin that they read that book. The One Thing by Gary Keller, a required reading for all of our coaching group members. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Baden. The 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. And if you're looking for something a little bit more magical, I have fallen in love with the Harry Potter series, and the narrator, Jim Dale, is amazing. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus, all of her stuff is great, starting with Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, and The Power of Vulnerability. And if you're an entrepreneur or leader, be sure to check out her book, Dare to Lead. Do you have something that you would like to share? Click on the podcast tab at ADHD Rewired. Click the button to be a guest at the top of the page and schedule a 15-minute interview. This is Eric Tivers, reminding you to keep learning, growing, and connecting. Self-care is not selfish. No matter what you get done or don't get done, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. And we don't need to do them in the hardest way possible. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.